Repulsion was a very low-budget movie. We're rushing through and squeezing. Everybody was squeezed. And if it has this look and if it has this atmosphere, it's only thanks to Gil Taylor.
Gil Taylor's distinctive style of cinematography has become legendary. Classic black and white work with Roman Polanski and Stanley Kubrick, to creating the look for George Lucas on his first Star Wars movie. After starting work in newsreel and documentaries, Gil Taylor became an assistant and camera operator at Gainsborough Studios in Islington, home of Alfred Hitchcock. He was given his first break as a cinematographer while filming Second Unit on the Bolting brothers' Fame is the Spur.
I was asked by Roy Bolting if I could photograph the dream sequence of this film. And it was a sequence where I had to use a lot of diffusion, and it was very beautiful, and it was so good that he said, "You're going to like my next movie," and so that's how I got it.
Gil's first feature was the Bolting brothers' The Guinea Pig, starring a young Richard Attenborough. BIP Studios at Elstree became Gil's home for many years, and the place where he photographed a number of British classics.
With Ice Cold and Alex, it was about 7 weeks was shot in the Libyan desert with sandstorms, extremely bad weather at times. I chose 5 electricians that had 5 little Range Rovers, Land Rovers, and each one had a brute on it and its own generator, which used, instead of the sun giving you some great black face with heavy shadow, because we shot when the sun was up there or was down here, but I was always able to put light, fill a light into the actors' faces, and if you remember, when you see the film, it's an exceptionally good looking film because I was lucky to do it that way.
Gil was chosen by Stanley Kubrick to light his classic Dr. Strangelove.
Kubrick teaches you an awful lot because from morning till night he's asking you questions. He would take a Polaroid of the shot before we actually shot it, and he'd say, "Have you got too much fill on this?" or something like that. Well, the negative that I was using and the Polaroid he was using were entirely different. But this interference prevented one from sometimes getting very powerful highlights and powerful shadows, because he'd be itching, saying, "You've got too much light in the shadows," or something ridiculous. If there was anything got through, it was usually wrong, and he'd say, "What happened to that, Gil?" But every one I marked that he did, I would put an asterisk or something on the number board and say, "That's your shot, Stanley," like that. But he's a frustrated cameraman.
When Alfred Hitchcock returned to England in 1972 to make Frenzy, Gil was summoned for an interview.
I was interviewed by him at Pinewood Studios, and he said, "Good morning, Mr. Taylor." He said, "You've been brought here because I want you to photograph my film." He said, "Frenzy." He said, I've seen the work of 25 other directors of photography, and I like yours." He said, "I like your work and I'd like to do my film if that's all right with you." So I said, "Yes, I would like to do it." I said, "Very much so," but I said, "Before you make a decision, perhaps I should tell you something. When I was an assistant on number 17, you had a habit of cutting people's ties off in the dark. They were rather posh Italian ties and things. Anybody who came in, he'd get all the lights out and cut the ties off. And I said, "Do you remember you lost yours once?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, Skeets Kelly and I did that." So he said, "You know," and we did. We got him into the dark room and we cut his tie off. And I said, "Would you have fired me, had you found out it was me? He said, yes, I jolly well would. I said, well, now you can make up your mind whether you choose me or not. He said, well, of course I want you to do it. He said, I'm so pleased to solve a thing that's worried me for many years. I was approached to do Star Wars after The Omen, and I thought, well, I've just done a horror film, so I may as well have a bit of fun with a film for children. So I read the script, which is about 300 pages long. I put 1,000 photo floods into these sets, and through a very special paper, you could shoot on the sets at any angle with no shadows. The film was made by a British crew, start to finish. Every 2 or 3 weeks I get a letter from the far parts of the earth for my autograph and a letter of how wonderful Star Wars 1 was against all the others.
Repulsion, starring Catherine Deneuve, was Roman Polanski's first shooting experience in Britain. Gil Taylor was to become his cinematographer for 3 films.
Literally, it's probably 20 years since I saw it, but there are so many key images in that film which are with me. And I think that when you get a relationship like the one that Polanski had in that film with his cinematographer, it's just an extraordinary amalgamation of a visual image and a director's head, director's mind, absolutely in concert.
I saw Dr. Strangelove shortly before I went to England to do Repulsion. And I asked for Gil Taylor, and he wanted to do it. So we got Gil Taylor, but it was a fight because of the nature of the project. It was a low-budget movie.
Here was a story about a beautiful girl who went to live in her sister's flat, and we had to produce an atmosphere whereby the place was haunted. The flat was made with a ceiling over the whole area, so you couldn't take the ceiling off. This meant that I had to get up to all sorts of tricks, bounce, slide off the ceiling, and also another thing was that this had to be handheld, because we were very tight and close to this girl the whole time.
We used whatever was available to shoot this film. The operator had a terrific idea of just putting 2 pieces of wood together with one across to put the camera on it, since we were doing a lot of handheld stuff. And in the handheld shots, what's really bothersome is when the camera moves like this. So that helped because he put it on his 2 shoulders. And the shoulders don't move even when you walk.
The camera was the most important thing and what it did. I mean, we used to do things that no normal people would do. I mean, for instance, the girl would be in bed, and we would sometimes, we'd put a pair of steps each side of the bed and a plank across it, and Alan Hall would climb up the steps, walk across the plank to the other to get the shot, and it would be perfect. The difference between it being great and being a normal shot wasn't good enough for Roman. It had to be there.
I remember the beginnings with Gil. I never worked with a cameraman like that. He would hardly use his meter. As a matter of fact, he never did. He would come in the morning with some kind of great light, huge light meter. It was like a wooden bar, wire and a cell at the end of it. And he would just check all lamps. And then he would put it in the corner and never took a meter out of his pocket. It wasn't. I've never seen him coming to an actor with and it was always right.
Catherine Deneuve, she was like a piece of Dresden china. She was so beautiful. Although I had to do it, I used to get very worried because I had an Araflex, very wide-angle lens. And when she was in one of her psycho things, she was almost in the front attachment, and we'd wander all around handheld. She looked hideous. And on the camera front, I had a tiny light, which was on a dimmer, and it was in a cigarette box, tobacco tin. And this gave me just enough light to see her, in just all her features. And that was used throughout the whole film. The hands through the walls were incredibly difficult to do. The ordinary camera stuff we had wouldn't do it, so we would have a baby's pram, rather expensive one, because it had strong springs, and we would get in that pram with the camera and be pushed between these hands so they folded over the lens and everything else. I mean, it was the only way you could do it. It's a strange film, and I mean, you were involved in it. You were. We were terribly involved in this machine of Romans, and he was there. He was directing it.